Imagine this. Two people commit the exact same crime in two different states. One gets 5 years in prison, the other, 15 years. How is that possible? Is justice truly blind, or is it bound by rules so complex even the judges are tied up in them? Welcome to the world of federal sentencing guidelines, a system that promises fairness yet often sparks controversy. To truly understand how they work, we need to peel back the layers of history, purpose, and the debates that surround them. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly how federal sentences are calculated, why they matter, and what makes them so divisive. Let's dive in. Before federal sentencing guidelines were introduced, sentencing in the United States was anything but consistent. Imagine two judges, both handling the same type of case. One might hand out probation while the other gives a decade-long sentence. This lack of structure led to widespread calls for reform in the 1970s and 1980s. The public wanted justice to be predictable, not a roll of the dice. Enter the Sentencing Reform Act of 1984, a landmark piece of legislation that created the United States Sentencing Commission. This commission developed the federal sentencing guidelines, which went into effect in 1987. These guidelines were supposed to standardize punishments and remove bias from the process. Think of them as a giant rule book, where every crime has a corresponding punishment range based on a calculated score. But how does it actually work? Here's how it breaks down. Federal sentencing guidelines consider two main factors: the severity of the crime and the defendant's criminal history. For severity, crimes are categorized into levels, with low-level offenses like minor fraud at one end and high-level crimes like murder or drug trafficking at the other. Then there's the criminal history score, which adds points for prior convictions. The higher the score, the longer the sentence. Judges use these two factors to find a recommended sentencing range on a chart. For example, a level 20 offense with a low criminal history might get 33 to 41 months in prison, but a level 20 with a high criminal history could see 70 to 87 months. It sounds simple, but here's where it gets complicated. There are additional factors that can adjust the score, called upward or downward departures. For instance, if a defendant shows remorse or cooperates with authorities, the judge might reduce the sentence. On the other hand, aggravating factors like leading a criminal organization can increase it. So why the controversy? Critics argue that these guidelines have led to some serious problems. Take mandatory minimum sentences, for example. These are non-negotiable penalties for certain crimes, like drug trafficking. A first-time offender caught with a small amount of drugs can still face decades in prison because of these rules. In many cases, judges have no choice but to hand down harsh punishments, even if they personally believe the sentence is too severe. And then there's the issue of mass incarceration. Critics say the guidelines, combined with mandatory minimums, have disproportionately impacted minority communities and nonviolent offenders. The United States now has one of the highest incarceration rates in the world, and many blame these policies for contributing to the problem. But not everyone sees it that way. Supporters argue that the guidelines provide consistency and prevent bias. They say that before the 1980s, sentencing was too arbitrary and prone to discrimination. The guidelines, they claim, bring order to a chaotic system. Here's an example of how this works in real life. Let's say someone is convicted of wire fraud involving $1 million. Based on the guidelines, the severity of this crime, including the financial loss, puts it at level 22. If they have no prior criminal record, their recommended sentencing range might be 41 to 51 months. But if that same person has a history of fraud, their range could jump to 70 to 87 months. And if they showed no remorse or refused to cooperate, the sentence might go even higher. The goal here is to create proportionality. A minor offense shouldn't receive the same punishment as a major one. But as critics point out, proportionality doesn't always mean fairness. Over the years, the system has faced reform attempts. In 2005, a landmark Supreme Court case, United States v. Booker, ruled that federal sentencing guidelines should be advisory, not mandatory. This gave judges more discretion, but it also reignited debates about consistency versus fairness. Today, some argue that the guidelines need a complete overhaul, while others believe they strike the right balance. So where does this leave us? Federal sentencing guidelines are, at their core, a tool. Like any tool, they can be used effectively or misused. They represent an attempt to balance consistency, fairness, and justice in a system that's far from perfect. Now it's your turn to weigh in. Are federal sentencing guidelines the key to a fairer justice system, or do they do more harm than good? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this video insightful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us here at 0 Hour Files, where we dive into the mysteries of the justice system and beyond. History never dies, but justice, that's a question we'll never stop asking.